There is a specific kind of silence that exists only in places where the dead outnumber the living. It's not just the absence of sound. It's a weight, a cold, suffocating pressure that settles over your chest the moment the gates lock shut behind you. You don't realize how much noise the world makes until you are stranded in a square mile of marble, iron, and rotting pine, listening to the grass grow over 6,000 graves. My name is Arthur. Yesterday, I was unemployed, staring at an eviction notice on my kitchen table with $74 left in my bank account. Today, I am the night watchman at Blackwood Pine Cemetery. The listing had been absurdly simple. 8-hour shift, midnight to 8 in the morning. Duties included walking the grounds twice, ensuring the mausoleums remained locked, and keeping trespassers out. The pay was nearly 3 times the market rate for a basic security gig. When I asked the caretaker during the interview why the wage was so high for a job that required no experience, he didn't look me in the eye. He just adjusted his glasses, slid the keys across the scratched wooden desk, and said the night air in the valley got exceptionally cold. I should have asked more questions, but when you're desperate, red flags look like party decorations. The caretaker left me with 3 things: a heavy bronze master key, an industrial flashlight that weighed like a brick, and a small leather-bound notebook left open on the desk in the security shack. Read the notes before your first round, the caretaker had said before driving away, his headlights slicing through the iron gates before vanishing down the dark country road. And don't leave the shack after 3 in the morning. No matter what you hear. I stood in the doorway of the security shack, watching the tail lights disappear into the fog. The shack was small, a weather-beaten wooden cabin built in the late 60s, equipped with a small electric heater that hummed like an angry hornet, a single cot, and a desk facing a window that looked out over the oldest section of the cemetery. The clock on the wall read 11:45. I sat down at the desk, poured a cup of lukewarm coffee from my thermos, and pulled the leather-bound notebook toward me. The pages were yellowed, smelling faintly of mildew and dried ink. On the first page, written in a shaky, hurried handwriting, was a list. Rule 1. Always lock the front gates at precisely midnight. If the gates refuse to latch, do not force them. Lock yourself in the shack immediately. Rule 2. During your 1 o'clock sweep, check the family vaults on the West Hill. If you see a blue candle burning inside the Vance family mausoleum, do not blow it out. Walk away. Rule 3. You will hear weeping near the pond around 2 in the morning. It will sound like a young woman calling for help. Do not go near the water. There is no pond on the official property map. Rule 4. At precisely 3 o'clock, the bell in the old chapel will ring 3 times. The chapel was demolished in 1982. When you hear the bell, turn off all lights in the shack and lie face down on the floor until 3:15. Rule 5. If anyone approaches the security shack window after 3:15 and asks for the time, do not answer. Look at the wall clock, but do not speak. They already know what time it is. I let out a dry, nervous laugh that sounded hollow in the small room. A prank. It had to be a prank. The previous watchman probably wrote this to mess with the new guy, a little hazing ritual to keep the night shift from getting boring. I checked my watch. 11:59. I grabbed the flashlight and the heavy key, stepping out into the crisp autumn air to secure the front gates. The night was pitch black. A thick, crawling fog had settled over the headstones, hugging the grass like a velvet shroud. The beam of my flashlight struggled to cut through the mist, illuminating jagged stone crosses, weeping angels, and rusted iron fences that looked like skeletal fingers reaching out of the earth. I reached the main gates right on time. The massive cast-iron doors swung heavy in my hands, groaning on rusted hinges as I pulled them together. I lined up the chain, pushed the padlock through the links, and turned the key. Click. The sound resonated through the darkness, sharp and final. I stood there for a second, catching my breath, listening to the wind whistle through the ancient oak trees that lined the perimeter. And then I heard it. A dragging sound. It was soft, rhythmic, coming from the gravel road just outside the gates, like someone pulling a heavy burlap sack across the stones. I raised my flashlight, aiming the beam through the iron bars into the darkness beyond the property line. The fog rolled over the gravel, dense and white. Cemeteries closed. I called out, my voice cracking slightly. visiting hours, and at dusk, the dragging sound stopped. For 5 long seconds, the only sound was the hum of my own breath. Then, out of the fog, a shape began to materialize. It was tall, unnaturally tall. It stood just beyond the reach of my flashlight beam, its silhouette blurred by the mist. It didn't have a flashlight. It didn't have a lantern. It was just standing there in the middle of an unlit country road, 6 miles from the nearest town. And then it took a step forward. The movement was wrong. Its legs didn't bend at the knees. It lurched forward in a stiff, mechanical jerk, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. The dragging sound came from its right foot. It wasn't wearing a shoe. It was dragging a bare, pale leg through the dirt. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled backward, the flashlight beam sweeping wildly across the iron bars. "I'm calling the police," I lied, gripping the heavy bronze key until my knuckles turned white. The figure reached the outer side of the gate. Long, emaciated fingers wrapped around the iron bars. The skin was gray, stretched paper-thin over bone, the nails cracked and caked with dried mud. It didn't speak. It just leaned its forehead against the cold iron and began to breathe, slow, deep, wet exhales that smelled of damp earth and rotting flowers, washing over my face through the gap in the gates. I didn't wait to see its face. I turned and ran back toward the security shack, my boots crunching violently on the gravel path. I slammed the door of the shack through the deadbolt and leaned against the wood, my lungs burning. The electric heater hummed peacefully on the floor, oblivious to the terror pulsing through my veins. On the desk, the wall clock ticked loudly. 1 o'clock. Time for the first sweep. I stared at the leather notebook. Rule 2. Check the family vaults on the West Hill. If you see a blue candle burning inside the Vance family mausoleum, do not blow it out. Walk away. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my sleeve. My hand was shaking so violently I almost dropped the flashlight. I didn't want to go back out there. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to climb out the back window, jump the fence, and run until I hit the highway. But my car was parked outside the main gate, right where that thing was standing. I was trapped. I took 3 deep breaths, adjusted my grip on the flashlight, and unlocked the door. The West Hill was the oldest part of Blackwood Pines. The graves here dated back to the early 1800s. Weathered sandstone markers tilted at grotesque angles, half swallowed by moss and ivy. The mausoleums sat at the crest of the hill like small marble houses for the dead. I walked slowly, keeping the flashlight beam low to avoid tripping on exposed roots. The temperature had plummeted. My breath bloomed in dense white clouds before me, and frost was beginning to form on the stone angels we passed. I reached the Vance family mausoleum. It was an imposing structure of gray granite, adorned with gargoyles at the corners and sealed by a pair of heavy iron doors with glass panes. I approached cautiously, shining the beam through the dusty glass. Inside, resting on a stone altar above a sealed sarcophagus, was a single glass pillar candle. It was burning. The flame wasn't yellow or white. It was a cold, piercing blue that cast long, unnatural shadows across the engraved family crest on the wall. The flame didn't flicker, despite the cold draft seeping through the cracked mortar. I remembered the rule. Do not blow it out. Walk away. I began to back away slowly, taking small, deliberate steps down the gravel path. And then I heard the crying. It started as a faint sob, drifting up from the bottom of the hill where the tree line met the darkness. A woman's voice, heartbroken and desperate. Please. Someone help me. I can't find the way out. Double quotes. My boots froze on the gravel. Rule 3. You will hear weeping near the pond around 2 in the morning. It will sound like a young woman calling for help. Do not go near the water. There is no pond on the official property map. I looked toward the source of the sound. Down at the base of the hill, past a row of weeping willows, the moonlight caught the edge of a still, dark body of water. A pond that I knew hadn't been there when I drove past that exact spot at 11 o'clock tonight. The water was slick and black like spilled ink. Standing knee-deep in the center of the dark pool was a figure in a torn white dress. Her back was turned to me, her long dark hair floating on the surface of the water around her. Please, she sobbed, her voice echoing with an unnatural, reverb-like clarity. that seemed to vibrate inside my teeth. "It's so cold down here. She began to turn around. I didn't stay to watch her face. I turned and sprinted up the hill, ignoring the roots that tripped my feet, ignoring the branches that slashed across my cheeks. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. Behind me, I heard the sound of splashing water fast. Heavy splashes, as if something was lunging out of the black pool and charging up the grassy slope behind me. I threw myself into the security shack, slammed the heavy oak door, and threw both deadbolts into place. I backed into the center of the room, panting heavily, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the wooden walls. Tick, tick, tick. The wall clock read to 50-9. My blood ran cold. Rule 4. At precisely 3 o'clock, the bell in the old chapel will ring 3 times. Turn off all lights in the shack and lie face down on the floor until 3:15. To 59 and 50 seconds. I lunged for the light switch on the wall and flipped it down. The room plunged into pitch darkness. I killed the flashlight, dropped to my knees, and pressed my forehead against the cold, dusty floorboards. 5 seconds. For 3 to 1 dong. The sound tore through the night sky, a massive iron bell ringing from somewhere high above the trees. The vibration was so intense it rattled the loose window panes in the shack and sent dust raining down from the ceiling rafters onto my back. A second strike. The floorboards beneath my chest vibrated. In the distance, across the vast expanse of graves, I heard the sound of hundreds of stone markers cracking open simultaneously. The sound of shifting earth. The sound of dry, leathery hands clawing through wet dirt. Dong. The third strike echoed into silence. And then came the footsteps on the porch outside the shack. Heavy, slow, 4 separate sets of feet, stepping onto the wooden planks right outside the door. I held my breath, pressing my palms flat against the floor. Tears of pure terror stinging my eyes. Something tapped on the window glass right above my head. Tap, tap. A pause. Then a voice, dry, rasping, like dead leaves scraping against concrete, spoke from just an inch beyond the glass. Double quotes, Watchman. Double quotes, it whispered. "What time is it?" My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. I remembered Rule 5. Look at the wall clock, but do not speak. They already know what time it is. In the dark, I raised my head just enough to look at the glowing hands of the wall clock. 3 o'clock. I squeezed my eyes shut and bit my lower lip until I tasted copper. Keeping my mouth clamped firmly shut. Double quotes, Watchman. Double quotes, the voice repeated. Closer this time, as if the speaker had pressed its throat directly against the glass. "Is it time to wake up?" The window frame groaned under immense pressure, as if something massive was leaning its entire weight against the glass. I lay there in the dark, frozen, counting every agonizing tick of the clock. 3:12, 3:13, 3:14, 3:15. A long, wet sigh echoed from the porch, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps retreating back down the gravel paths, fading into the distance until there was only the hum of the electric heater left in the room. I didn't get up off the floor. I stayed there, face down in the dust, until the first rays of golden morning light broke through the shack's window at 6 a.m. when the caretaker arrived at 8 to relieve me. I was sitting on the cot with my bag packed. He looked at my face, took the bronze key from my trembling hand, and gave a slow, knowing nod. "You survived the first night," he said quietly, pulling a thick stack of $100 bills from his jacket pocket and placing it on the desk. "Most quit before 2. I looked at the money, then at the open notebook on the desk. At the bottom of the page, under Rule 5, a new line of handwriting had appeared overnight in fresh, dark ink that hadn't been there when I started my shift. Rule 6. If you survive Night 1, you must return for Night 2. If you don't, they will come to your house to ask you the time.